very nouveau, cutting-edge things that were happening in the spiritual element of the society, and they would gather for a conference so when we went to a conference in my movement, you had a book and this is the program, 8 to 9, 4 choices. This is in that room, that's in this room, this is in this room. Break for this, 6-minute break, and then I went to the conference of the Jewish Renewal Movement. 9 o'clock, we're all gathering on the grass. We start off in a big circle. Everybody's together. We start off in a big circle. The first thing you do is you hug your neighbor, this side and this side, and then you tell them what's the most important thing in your life, and then total strangers. You get connected, and then you sing together, and then you have the person who's speaking, speak, and they can't speak too long because you have to break for another hug and so on. And they added to Jewish expressions and Jewish rituals, they added a personal component. Really, it took Judaism and made it a two-way street. Jewish traditions and rituals were feeding into the individual, but the individual was also feeding back into the tradition. So if someone would say, to me, Yom Kippur, the day of fasting, is not just a day where I don't eat, but it's a day where I cleanse myself of the attributes of my life that I'm not happy with, that I think I offend people with, and so on. And they would write notes, make a note of all the things that you did that you didn't like about yourself. And then they would wrap it up and then they would burn it in a fire. And they weren't worried about whether you were allowed to make a fire on Yom Kippur or allowed to write. That was secondary. And that's the Jewish renewal movement. Simultaneously, there was another element that was developing that also came out of the conservative movement, but at the same time, but for different reasons, that rejected the corporate organization of Jewish life. Welcome to our synagogue. The dues for membership are $1,000 per year. How many children do you have? The tuition in the school is $800 per child, a discount of 10% for the second child. If you cannot afford it, bring in your tax form to prove that you can't afford it, and you'll meet privately, etc. You would like a seat for the holidays? Well, we don't have seats up front, but we still have 2 seats of very organizational. The rabbi became a CEO. The cantor had to come from a musical school, and it was very bureaucratic. And this group, coming out of the conservative movement, the most actually the most desirable of the students, they said, we want to start living Jewish life in small groups without bureaucracy. We don't need a rabbi, we're all smart enough. We went to, some of them are rabbis. We want to meet at a home, not in a building where we have to pay a mortgage, etc. We want to meet around the table. We don't want 2,000 people in the synagogue. We want 15, 20 max. And that started the chavurot. Chavurah means a clump of people. The chavurah is a group of friends. And that's how their movement started. And they have been crossing over with the renewal movement. The last movement to tell you about, and then finally I will allow you to have to stop hearing me, is the humanistic group. Humanistic Judaism developed from the Reform and the Reconstructionist. And they said, even the Reform, that have given up kosher food and all sorts of other things like that, they still talk about God as an old man in the sky. I don't believe that. I am a humanist. I'm an atheist. And yet I'm Jewish. You cannot be a Christian and be an atheist, I suppose, because if you don't believe in God, how could you believe that he had a son who died on the cross to save you from your sins? But as a Jew, I'm a Jew because I'm culturally Jewish. I'm a Jew because I feel bound with the history and the heritage of this people. I'm a Jew because I exalt its values. I'm proud of what Jews have accomplished. But I'm not a Jew because I believe in God. That went out with the creation stories and Adam and Eve. And so, a movement was begun, started with one rabbi, called Humanistic Judaism. You don't have to be an atheist, but you could be an atheist and feel comfortable. And God is not really mentioned in the service. I can't say prayers because they're not prayers anymore. They're more like greetings. But they also observe the holidays and Shabbat and things like that. But without making it mandatory to believe in God. The humanist. So now you have Hasidic from Russia and Ukraine, Yeshiva from Lithuania, Orthodox, Eastern Europe, Conservative from America, Reform started in Germany, Reconstructionist, an outgrowth of Conservative, the thinking man's form of Judaism. Renewal and Chavarot, the warm and fuzzy expression of Judaism. And Humanistic Judaism that says we are culturally Jewish, we're bound together by history and heritage, but God is not essential. With that, I probably should have stopped a half hour ago, but with that, I rest my case, and I hope that you have learned something from that. And okay, so I'll talk some more if there's a reason for it, but let's start with where we are now.
Thank you.
Do the humanistic ones today have education programs for the young ones?
Good question. The humanistic Jews generally don't have their own education programs for children because they're a very small movement. And when there's a humanistic synagogue, the people come from all the way around because they want to be in that group. But they're not it's easily traveling to bring the children 2, 3, 4 times a week. So the children are educated in Reform, mostly. And then there's a new phenomenon that's developing, and that is giving children a Jewish experience through summer camps and trips to Israel, and when it comes to what they have to know for bar mitzvah, having them taught by somebody hired for that exclusive responsibility. That's happening in the humanistic movement. It's happening in Reform. It's happening in Conservative. It's happening. Any other comments? It doesn't have to be a question. It can also be a point of view. Maybe you'll even tell me a little bit about yourselves. I have no idea why you're here or what you're doing in Vilnius and why you came tonight. So, yeah.
Oh, thank you so much. That was a wonderful, wonderful talk. I agree with everything you said. I just wanted to add something about the Jewish culture in Vilna before the war. that had once a big movement in America but doesn't anymore. In Vilna, there was no reform or conservative. There was only what we would today call Orthodox, although with different shades and even some Lithuanian Hasidim like Karlin and Chabad.
Yes, actually, Rimas took me to, oh, I was in Kalma, to the Hasidic synagogue, which surprised me.
The Hasidic Armenian, very many, but they were Lithuanian Hasidim, very different. But there was a very important minority that defined themselves as secular Jews, and they would have been very offended to be left out. Many of them attended synagogue once, twice, 5 times, or even more a year, and many of the old secular Jews from Vilna, Warsaw, Kiev, throughout Eastern Europe, would have the attitude, if I go once a year, it has to be a real shul, an Orthodox shul, because I want to experience what my forefathers experienced, whatever I believe. Now, that secular movement, the secular Yiddishist movement with its dozens of subcategories, was once very big in America. It had up to a dozen daily Yiddish newspapers in New York City, ranging from Zionist to far left. And I think, especially in this part of the world, it's very important to see that it developed differently, with secularism developing with various attitudes toward religion, but no reform, no conservative, no chavurot, no reconstructionist. Although Mordechai Kaplan, whom you mentioned, we are proud, was born not far from here in Tzvintzyan, Shventshonis, 45 miles to the north of here.
Really? Yeah. What town?
Tzvintzyan in Yiddish and Shventshonis today. And Tzvintzyan.
Yes, that's a very good point that you made. Certainly anybody's giving a talk about the spectrum of religious identification in Lithuania, or anywhere in Europe. Poland also would have been true. Would have to account for that. As a matter of fact, as Dahlia and I were walking here to the library through the old Jewish town, I asked her to what percentage of Jews in Vilnius were non-Orthodox. I know that there were frum and there was secular. Was the secular community small? Was it tiny? Was it half? What was it? And what she said to me was, she didn't know the figures, but she also knew what their ideology is. Most likely communist.
Leftist, but most were anti-communist. That again, everything looks different from outside. From here in Vilna, the Bundists, the territorialists, the anarchists, the social democrats, they hated Zionism and communism equally. They believed that their non-communist democratic socialism, which meant staying where you are. It was an anti-migration movement, known in Yiddish as
I
Deutsch.
didn't mean to imply that all the secular Jews were
No, but here in Vilna there was 1% of the
socialist movement.
So, and because communism was illegal here in the Polish Republic or in Kaunas, Kovna in the Lithuanian Republic, there were no communist newspapers. There were a few hundred illegal Jewish communists in both cities.
Okay.
But it was their enemy stereotype that they're all communists.
So let's take that for a moment and transport it to America. Because there was that very significant element of Yiddishists, Bundists, etc., communists, socialists, etc., in the United States were anti-religious and in most cases, or many cases, anti-Zionist before the Holocaust. Okay. Where are they today? Here, they were put to death. Where are they today in America?
They collapsed entirely because they failed to pass it on to their kids, and it was a total and miserable failure of transmission. But they left 10,000 great works of literature and other things that are part of the history, and a small interest today.
That's my point. Yeah. It's important to hear that. The Orthodox in America from the late 1800s are still in America. The conservatives that founded there, they're still in America. The Reform, not only still in America, but most people, not most, 35% in the study said that they identify as Reform. It's misleading, I'll tell you that in a moment why it's misleading, but they're healthy and they're vibrant. The Reconstructionist movement is growing actually, the renewal movement is growing. The humanist movement is too soon to tell. But where are the descendants of the totally secular Jews? And David is correct. They collapsed. They disappeared. Meaning what? They assimilated. Because wanting to save the world is very much of a Jewish value. But without the things that identify you as Jewish, you lose you lose that sense of community, that boundary. So one of the big problems of philanthropists in the United States, Jewish philanthropists, who are not particularly religious or even affiliated with synagogues and movements, is that they have taught their children that being a Jew means being a good person. And that's why they said, I give to Israel, and I give to Jewish hospitals, and I give to Jewish this, I give to Jewish that. Their children listened more carefully than their parents realized, and their children are giving the money now that they inherited it to save the whales and save the dolphins, or all sorts of charities and needs that are not connected at all to the Jewish community. And with it, the people that they're meeting are non-Jews of the same social caliber, and because they have a humanist approach, they're saying, well, I'm Jewish, you're Catholic, we're getting married, let's have a priest and a rabbi. Let's have Hanukkah and Christmas. And the children of those unions are one step away from even forgetting that they have a Jewish heritage. So the reason that it didn't last here, although the Nazis treated them all alike, is what's happening there. And that's the danger of reform. And I'm glad you mentioned it because it gives me a chance to add that what we're seeing in the reform movement is a